Hello my friends, and welcome back to a cozy rainy day in the studio. Today I'm going to be leading you through a fun and festive watercolor painting. We are going to be painting these cardinals sitting on a fence post in the snow. If you enjoy lessons like these, please do feel free to subscribe to my channel. It would help me out a lot. Leave a like and a comment, all of that stuff. And really quickly, before we get into the video, if you're looking to support me as an artist in any way, make sure you check out the description below. There are several links in there, including one to my book, Watercolor Wonderlust, which is an instructional book on watercolor painting. There's also my Etsy shop, my Patreon, all of that stuff down there. So if you like my art and you'd like to support me, please do check out the description. Otherwise, we will get right into this painting. It's a really fun painting. I love painting cardinals. They're just so vibrant and colorful. And we have a couple little fun effects that we're going to talk about in this painting, but mostly we're just going to have fun and paint a bird. As usual, I'll start by telling you what materials I'm using. People always ask. It doesn't matter really. Whatever you've got at home is going to be fine. But just in case you're wondering, the watercolor paper I'm using today is from All Things Cotton Watercolor Paper. It is an Etsy seller that I've talked to before, and she makes this beautiful cotton watercolor paper by hand. And so I will link her shop in the description. But I've cut the paper down to 4 by 5.5. So I've got this one, and then I've got this one that we're going to paint on right now. My watercolors are from Winsor Newton, as usual. This is my little custom palette that I've made with all of my different colors. Whatever colors that you have, whatever paints you have at home is going to be fine. And then my paintbrushes are from Princeton Neptune for these two. I've got a 10 round and a 4 round, and then my little detail brush is from Christy Rice's brush set, which is also linked in the description. So I've got a large, medium, and a small brush. That is what I would recommend having. All of my art supplies are linked in my Amazon storefront, which is in the description, and if they are not on Amazon, they are linked in a separate link in the description. So if you want to shop any of the supplies that I use, you can find them in the description of the video. The other supplies that I have are just the normal pencil, cup of water, paper towels, you know, the standard stuff that you need for watercolor. Now, before we start our painting, we do want to make sure we add a little drop of water to each of our pans. This just helps to get those paints dissolved, and it just makes it much easier to work with. So I just use my brush and I add a little drop of water to each of my colors so that we can let that sit for a minute or two. We probably won't use every color, but it's good to have them ready just in case. Okay, so let that dissolve, let that sit while you do your pencil sketch. So the first thing that we are going to do is come up with a pencil sketch so that we can use that to guide our painting. I have linked the reference photo in the description as well. It is from Unsplash, so you can pull that up and use it to sketch out your drawing, your painting. Don't feel like you have to sketch it out. Like if you want to just trace it and go directly into painting, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes the drawing part can take way too long, and it's just, you know, it's wasting time when you could be focusing on your painting. Now you'll notice as you look at the reference photo, it is much wider than this paper. We are using a vertical piece of paper. So I really just cropped out the excess and just focused in on the bird. If you'd like to paint the whole fence, you can and use a long piece of paper. That is up to you. But if you want to copy me, I like to start with the fence here just to give us an idea of like where we are in the painting. So I'm just going to start with a loose vertical line here. That's about the distance that I want from the edge of the paper, maybe a little more, like here. And then I'm going to just go at an angle up here, a little lower, and across. And I'm going to take up go about halfway across the paper here, maybe a little bit more. Go back down. And there we go, that's our fence post. And I like it shifted just a little bit to the left or right. It makes it a little bit more of an interesting composition than if it's smack in the middle of the page. Okay, and then we're going to sketch out the bird. I like to just do kind of a loose, very round, fluffy shape for the body. And I'm drawing really lightly, as you can see here as well. I just like to make sure I can edit these lines and they don't show up too dark before I'm happy with the shape. Okay, and then the bird goes all the way up, its little crown goes up to here. We've got our beak is like a little sort of triangle shape there. And then we've got the crown goes down this way. And then the back of the body just is more of a flat line that goes around here. And then we've got the wings sticking out from the body a little bit. And then we've got the tail feathers down and away. Okay, So something like that. You can always kind of keep looking at the reference photo, edit your shapes here, but they're really just round, fluffy birds. So as long as you get a rounded shape, it'll look good. That crown. You can also sketch out that black marking around its face, kind of like that shape. Can't really see an eye in there. It's really hard to see, but it's right there. And then we can lastly sketch out the legs. So I've got one kind of at an angle here, and I like to just do kind of like curved lines for the talons. And we've got another leg. Oh, I think I might need to move that leg. Just had to move that leg over just a little bit so that I have room for this one. That is a little bit more vertical. Okay, something like that. And then the last little thing that we're going to sketch out is the snow. So you can see there's snow kind of in between the fence posts here. So I'm just going to start right here, sketch out kind of a wavy curve that way. And same thing over here, it's a little higher up. So we'll just go there. And then just a little pile of snow on top of the fence post here. Something like that. Okay, so get your sketch. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is just practice, so don't feel like you need to make a perfect sketch. And once you're ready, we're going to start painting. For our first little layer in this painting, we are going to paint in the background, which you can see is that kind of light gray color. And so we are going to mix a few colors together just to create a light gray. So I'm going to mix together brown, green, and a little bit of blue, and maybe a little bit of burnt sienna. Honestly, you can mix together literally any color, any combination of colors, and it will kind of end up gray. And so I'm just going to mix together colors until I get to a gray that I like. And I think this is good, and I'm going to add a ton of water to it. You want this to be really, really light. Okay, so something like that. You can always swatch it on a separate piece of paper just so that you don't have to see what the color is as soon as you put it down on the paper. So I think that color will work, and we can go back to our paper now. Back on our paper, we are going to use a big brush and fill in loosely the entire background up until we get to the fence posts and the snow. Now, stylistically, I do like to leave a few spaces as I'm doing this that are kind of blank. This paper has a good texture, and so I just like to kind of let that paint break a couple times over the texture of the paper. You are welcome to just fill it in as a flat wash if you don't like that style. Okay, now once we get down to here, just keep in mind we do have some snow on top of the fence post there, and so we're going to paint around that. We're going to paint around the fence post, and then we're going to follow along this line that we sketched out for the snow. And then just fill everything else in, paint over the bird. All the way down to there, okay? And then we're gonna let this dry completely before we move on. Next, we are going to mix up our colors for the bird. So we need two colors. We are going to mix up a vibrant red. So I'm gonna start with cadmium red here, which is this really bright red. I might mix a little bit of alizarin crimson in there, which is just a slightly darker red, but it's mostly just that one red. I'm gonna add a little bit of water, but we do want this color to be fairly saturated, so I'm gonna leave it pretty strong. And then our second color is just going to be a darker red. So I'm switching over to alizarin crimson, which is this kind of more purpley red. And I'm gonna add a little bit of brown to it here. Okay, so it should be something like this. It should be just a little bit darker, a little bit more muted. And adding some water to that as well. And if I swatch those for you, here is that darker red, and here is that lighter red. So something like that. So you can see here I've switched over to my 4-round. This is my medium brush. Just gives me a little bit more control over where this paint is going to go. And we are going to start filling in our bird. So I'm starting with that lighter red that we mixed. And I'm just gonna start here on the breast and fill in the general shape that we had. And then as I kind of run out of paint on my brush, I'm going to use the very tip of the brush and just add a little bit of texture to that outside. So just little feathers and fluff and stuff that's just kind of sticking out from the form a little bit. Okay, something like that. We're going to bring this color up over about halfway through the bird. And then we can switch over to that darker red and just start filling in the wing area. And the tail. All right, and then I'm going to switch back to the lighter red and just fill in the crown up here. Again, adding some of that texture because it's really fluffy up here. He's got lots of feathers kind of sticking up on his head. Okay, so there's our general outline of the bird. We are going to let this dry and then we will come back and add a little bit more detail on top of it, okay? While that's drying, we are going to mix up one more color to use for the details, which is just going to be a more saturated and darker red. So now we are going to start with brown, add in both of the reds that we were using, and a little bit of blue. And not very much water. You can see this is a much thicker paint, and this is going to be used for those dark shadows. So back to our painting here, I have switched over to my detail brush, and I'm just going to start with our medium red, so the one we used for the back and the wings of the bird and the tail. And with this, I'm just going to start adding details. And you can see in the reference photo, we have some feathers here that we were just going to start to imitate. We've got kind of layers of feathers kind of on the wing here. And I'm just using my small brush and just using kind of really fine feathery strokes to paint these feathers. And just make the bird look fluffy and try and imitate those layers. Okay, we can do the same thing on the tail here. There's kind of a lighter spot there, and then it goes down into some darker areas here. And just sort of adding that detail. Okay, so now we are just going to start building on top of this with those other colors. So with that darkest color that we just mixed, we can go back in and keep adding these lines. I want you to look at the reference photo and see where the darkest areas are. So I can see that on this wing here. Quite dark at the end of it. Quite dark at the ends of these feathers as well. Okay, so we'll start with something like that. We can also switch back and forth and go back into our lighter red and just do one more layer on the breast here. And this is where we can kind of add some texture as well. So I'm just kind of using short, choppy brush strokes to kind of imitate the fluffy feathers here. And because we're using the same color here, all we're doing is adding a little bit of vibrance, but you can see as the paint starts to dry, it'll really blend in and you'll just get a very, very subtle texture. If you want to add some extra little feathers kind of sticking out, you can with your detail brush. And we can do the same thing up here at the crown. Okay, so feel free to just kind of work back and forth between all three of those colors, building up this texture. There's really no wrong way you can do it as long as you are kind of following the direction of the feathers from the reference photo. As long as you're doing that and just kind of building on those details, the more you do, kind of the more detailed it'll look. It's kind of a fun texture to imitate. And just really try and pay attention to where those dark areas are, where the light areas are, and leave those alone. Go back to the darker color here. Once you're happy with all of that texture on those red feathers on the bird, we are going to add the little details, which are the beak and the black spot around the eyes. So let's start with the beak. Let's just do red and yellow combined to make orange. And we're adding a bit of water to that as well. And when you're ready, you can bring that paint back here and just fill in the beak shape. Like that, and we can let that dry all the way. And last, we just need a dark color to fill in that black spot around the eye. So I'm just going to use Payne's Gray, which is a very dark bluish gray, and I'm going to add a little bit of red to that so it turns into a little bit of a purple. And I'm keeping that paint really thick and using my detail brush. And now we can just carefully and with kind of flicking brush motions paint in that black spot around the eye. Okay, and then last little texture here on the bird. I'm going to use my detail brush and one of my darker reds and just paint in carefully the line between the top beak and the bottom beak. Okay, so now that we are happy with the detail on our bird, we are going to move on to painting in the fence post and the snow. So let's mix up a grayish brown to paint in the fence post. So I'm going to mix together brown and blue. When you mix those together, you should end up with a pretty neutral kind of gray-brown color. You can even add a little bit of yellow ochre if you want to, or burnt sienna, or both if you want to just kind of change up the color a little bit. But our goal is to get to something like this. So back to our painting here, I'm just going to use my medium brush and fill in with a flat wash the entire fence post here. Nothing fancy here, we're just avoiding the snow, just filling in this one shape. I do like to rotate my painting once I get around to this side of the fence post because I have the most control in the tip of my brush. This way I can really use that end of the brush to carve out this shape instead of relying on the other end of my brush to get an accurate shape. There we go. While that's drying, let's mix up a couple of other colors to make the texture on that wood fence post. So I'm going to mix up some brown and some blue. Basically same color combinations that we did last time. We are just going to change up the ratios. So I'm going to make one that's a little bit more brown. So I'm adding more brown and more burnt sienna. And then maybe I'll make a color that's more gray. So I'll do brown plus more blue and no yellow or burnt sienna. Something like this. It doesn't need to match mine exactly. We're just trying to find some different colors that will match the wood grain. And with our detail brush, we can go into whatever color you want to start with and just create some general kind of wood grain shapes. So I'm just using vertical lines, kind of pressing on my brush in different ways so that I get some thick lines and then some thin lines. Sometimes the lines just disappear completely. And even as my brush runs out of paint, you can see that gives me a really nice wood grain texture as well. Maybe I switch over to that other brown that I made, and we just continue doing the same thing. And I do like to just make sure I add a little bit of a shadow, just a little bit darker areas just underneath the top of the fence post here. That's kind of where the rain soaks in, and it just kind of makes the wood a little darker there. Okay, once you're happy with that texture, you can let it dry completely. We're closing in on our final details here of this painting, so let's do the shadow of the snow here. So I'm going to mix together ultramarine blue and just a touch of brown, just to make kind of a blue-gray color. And we're going to add some water to this as well. We want this pretty watered down. This is just going to be the shadow on our snow. So once you get to a color just like this, go back to your paper. And on our painting, we're going to add a little bit of a shadow just on the kind of bottom layer of the snow on the fence post here. And you can see this is going to be a really subtle color. It's not going to show up a ton, but it's just going to add a little bit of a shadow that will just help this look a little bit more realistic. We'll do the same thing on the snow that just kind of touches the fence posts here. I think I need to make my color just a little bit more visible. Something like that. And I'm just giving it kind of a rough texture that will look like those crystals of snow, like that. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. And once you're happy with that, you can just let that dry all the way. And our last little detail is to paint in the legs of the bird. So let's combine brown and alizarin crimson and a little bit of blue, just to get a nice dark red. A little bit more brown and blue than we're used to for the other colors. The legs are pretty dark. And add a little bit of water, but we're keeping it a pretty strong color. So now I am just going to fill in the shapes that I sketched out. Just kind of these thin little lines for the talons. Bird feet are hard to draw, I will say, hard to paint. And so don't beat yourself up too much here. Just, do your best. Kind of try and copy the shapes that you see. And don't worry about it too much. People will be focused on the beautiful red colors of the actual bird and not so much its feet. Okay, so something like that. I'm not going to put too much detail into it. The last little thing that I wanted to mention is, it's not really in the reference photo, but I do like to add a little bit of a highlight to the eye when I'm painting these. I think it just makes it look a little bit more realistic. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can either use any white paint that you have and just add a little dot where you want the highlight to be, or you can take an X-Acto knife and just very carefully pick out where you want that highlight to be and scratch off the very top layer of the paint. Little tiny highlight that you can see there. Those are your options. And you can do whatever feels right to you. Alrighty, and I feel pretty good about that painting, so I think I'm going to stop there. Again, you can continue adding texture to the wood grain or to the feathers. You don't have to be done here. That is up to you. But whenever you are done, just sign in the bottom. I like to sign bottom right corner, but if you like to sign somewhere else, feel free to do that. And I think that'll do it for today's painting. I hope you enjoyed this little lesson. These are fairly easy to whip out once you kind of get the first one down. So if you wanted to make these for holiday cards or just gifts to give out to people, you could definitely do more than one of these and be done pretty quick once you've done the first one. Please do leave a like and a comment down below. That really helps me out a lot. I am trying to grow a little bit more on YouTube, so letting me know what you liked about this video or letting me know what else you'd like to see on this channel in the comment section really helps. And do subscribe as well, that helps me a lot too. And I hope you have a lovely holiday season, and I will see you in the next video.